Be me. I have a degree in psychology, I've read every important book on modern social theory, and I consider myself a conscientious parent. My life's work, my greatest project, has been my son, Adan. I decided from the moment I knew I was having a boy that I would do everything in my power to raise him differently. I was going to give the world a man who was thoughtful, empathetic, and completely free of the toxic masculinity that had poisoned generations before him. My ex-husband, Colt, didn't really get it. He was a good man in his own way, I suppose, just traditional, stuck in the past. I remember when Adan was maybe 3 years old. Colt's parents came to visit and brought a gift. It was a huge, bright yellow toy dump truck. Adan's eyes lit up, the way any kids would. But I saw it for what it was, the first brick in a wall of gendered expectations. I calmly took the truck and explained to everyone that in our house we supported gender-neutral play. I suggested we exchange it for a building block set or a play kitchen, something that fostered creativity and nurturing skills. Colt got this tight look on his face, but didn't say anything in front of his parents. Later that night, he told me I was overthinking it. "It's just a toy," he said. That was always his response. He never understood the deeper structures at play. I tried to explain that it's not just a toy, it's a symbol. It's the beginning of a script that tells boys they should be loud, destructive, and obsessed with machinery. I was trying to write a better script for our son. The dump truck disappeared. I donated it to a local charity drive the next week. Adan played with his dolls, his art supplies, and his wooden animal figures. He was a quiet, gentle child. I documented our progress on my blog. Nothing with my name or face, just an anonymous parenting journal. I wrote about our breakthroughs, about dismantling patriarchal norms one bedtime story at a time. The community I found online was incredible. So much support. They saw what I was doing was important, even revolutionary. When Aden started elementary school, the real challenges began. The playground was a breeding ground for the exact behaviors I was trying to shield him from. One afternoon, I think it was in second grade, he came home with a tear in his shirt and a scrape on his cheek. My heart just sank. He told me a boy named Michael had pushed him off the swings because he wanted a turn. I asked Adan what he did. He said he just walked away because I taught him that violence is never the answer. I hugged him so tight, so proud that my lessons had stuck. When Colt got home from work, he saw Adan's cheek and went rigid. He asked what happened, and Adan told him the story. Colt looked at me, then at Adan, and asked him why he didn't push Michael back. I saw red. I couldn't believe he would suggest that. I asked him to step into the kitchen. We had a huge argument. He was talking about standing up for yourself, and I was trying to explain the concept of breaking the cycle of aggression. He just wasn't getting it. He thought I was teaching Aden to be a doormat. I was teaching him to be the bigger person. There's a difference. The next day I went to the school. I had a long meeting with the principal. I explained that the school had a responsibility to foster a safe environment, not a place where physical dominance was the rule of law. The principal was useless. He gave me some platitudes about boys will be boys. That phrase is like nails on a chalkboard to me. It's an excuse for barbarism. I wrote a long post about it on my blog that night. It got hundreds of comments from other mothers dealing with the same thing. It was so validating. Life with Colt became a series of small battles over Adan's upbringing. He wanted to sign him up for Little League Baseball. I suggested a drama club or a pottery class instead. He wanted to take him fishing. I countered with volunteering at the local animal shelter. Every suggestion he made seemed to reinforce the same tired, old-fashioned idea of what a man should be. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was just trying to be a mindful parent. I wanted Adan to build his identity based on his character, not on a set of prehistoric gender roles. He was such a sweet boy. He loved helping me in the garden and trying new recipes. He was sensitive and artistic. I was so afraid that Colt's influence would stamp all of that out of him, replace it with a hard, unfeeling shell. The breaking point came when Adan was around 10 or 11. We were living in an older house, and things were always breaking. One weekend, the faucet in the bathroom sink started leaking constantly. Drip, drip, drip. Colt said he'd fix it. He went into the bathroom with his toolbox. A few minutes later, he called Adan in to give him a hand. I walked by the open door and saw him trying to show Adan how to use a wrench. Adan looked so lost and uncomfortable. He had grease on his hands and a confused look on his face. Colt was talking about washers and gaskets, using this commanding man-of-the-house tone. It was like a scene from a 1950s sitcom. It made my skin crawl. I stepped into the doorway and said Adan's hands were too small and delicate for that kind of work, and that he should go finish his reading assignment. I told Colt that we could just call a plumber. That's what they're for. The look he gave me was just cold. He said, "I'm trying to teach our son how to be self-sufficient." I told him he was teaching our son that a man's worth is measured by his ability to perform manual labor. The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. It went on for hours. It became clear that we didn't just have different parenting styles. We had fundamentally different worldviews. He saw a father teaching his son a useful skill. I saw a man forcing his son into a performative act of masculinity. We separated about 6 months after that. It was devastating, but I knew it was for the best, for Adan's sake. I needed to create a home environment for him that was consistent, supportive, and free from Colt's archaic ideas. The divorce was hard. Colt fought for more custody than I thought was appropriate. I had to explain to the mediator that his parenting philosophy was actively detrimental to our son's emotional development. In the end, I got primary custody. He got him every other weekend. It felt like a victory. Adan was safe with me. During those first few years after the divorce, Adan was my rock. He was so understanding and mature about the whole thing. He never complained about his father. He'd come back from his weekends with Colt and seem quiet. I'd ask him what they did. He'd usually just shrug and say, "Stuff." Sometimes he'd come back smelling of campfire smoke or motor oil. I'd have him take a long shower, and we'd do some aromatherapy to cleanse the negative energy. Colt's brother, Killian, was a particularly bad influence. The man was a caricature, a mechanic who lived in a small house out in the country and probably had a pin-up calendar in his garage. He was everything I was trying to steer Adan away from. Colt would sometimes take Adan to visit him. I couldn't stop it, legally. But I would have long talks with Adan afterwards, deconstructing the problematic things he might have heard or seen. I'd ask him if his uncle made any sexist jokes or used any exclusionary language. Adan would just shake his head and say Killian didn't talk much. As Adan entered his teen years, he really started to blossom into the young man I always knew he could be. He was an excellent student. He was thoughtful in class discussions. His teachers always remarked on his sensitivity. He didn't have a huge circle of friends, but I saw that as a good thing. He was selective. He avoided the loud, boisterous crowds of boys who dominated the school hallways. His friends were more like him, quiet, intelligent, and respectful. We had a wonderful relationship. We could talk about anything. We'd watch documentaries together and discuss social issues. I was so proud of how he could articulate complex ideas about privilege and systemic injustice. My blog was thriving. I had a dedicated following. People would write to me asking for advice. I often used Adan as an example, anonymized, of course. He was my proof of concept. A few times, I did notice some odd things. When he was about 15, I was tidying his room and found an old, beat-up phone tucked under his mattress. It wasn't the smartphone I'd gotten him for his birthday. It was an ancient-looking flip phone. I turned it on. The only contact in it was a single letter, K. My blood ran cold. Killian. I confronted Adan when he got home from school. I tried to stay calm, to use non-accusatory language. He had a perfectly reasonable explanation. He said his dad gave it to him a long time ago, just for emergencies when he was at his house, in case his main phone died. He said he barely ever used it and had forgotten it was even there. He seemed so sincere. I wanted to believe him. The alternative, that he was actively hiding communication with his uncle, was too painful to consider. I told him I understood, but that I believed in open and honest communication in our family. I said he didn't need a secret phone. He could talk to anyone he wanted. He apologized for not telling me about it and handed the phone over without a fight. I felt a wave of relief. It was just a misunderstanding. My son wouldn't lie to me. Around that time, he started asking for more independence. He wanted to take the bus to the library on Saturdays to study. I was hesitant at first, but I knew that smothering him would be counterproductive. Part of raising a healthy individual is learning to let go. I agreed, as long as he checked in with me regularly. He was so responsible about it. He'd text me when he got there and when he was leaving. I thought it was a wonderful sign of his growing maturity. He was taking his studies seriously. carving out his own space. Looking back, I suppose I should have been more suspicious. He was always so tired when he got home on Saturday evenings. I assumed it was from hours of intense studying. He'd have calluses on his hands sometimes. When I asked about them, he said it was from carrying heavy books from the shelves. It made sense. I didn't question it. My focus shifted to his future. College was just around the corner. I helped him research programs at progressive, forward-thinking universities. We talked about majors that would allow him to make a real difference in the world: sociology, social work, political science. He seemed receptive to all of it. He was always so agreeable. Sometimes I wonder if he was too agreeable, but then I'd tell myself that was the goal. I had raised a son who wasn't argumentative or defiant. He was collaborative. He was a partner in his own upbringing. For his 17th birthday, I threw him a small party with a few of his close friends and my own circle. He was polite and gracious, thanking everyone for their gifts. My friends gushed about him afterwards. They all said the same thing. "You did such an amazing job, Heaven." I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It had been a long, difficult road, especially after the divorce. But it was all worth it. I had succeeded. I had raised a good man. As his 18th birthday approached, I started planning something special. It wasn't just a birthday, it was a milestone. It was the culmination of my life's most important work. I wanted to celebrate him, to present him to the world. I decided on a catered brunch at our house. I invited all my friends, colleagues from a nonprofit I volunteered at, and some of my most dedicated blog followers who lived locally. It was going to be a celebration of a new kind of masculinity. Adon seemed a little overwhelmed by the idea. He asked if we could just do something quiet, maybe just the two of us. I told him I understood his modesty, but this was a moment worth celebrating in a big way. I said it wasn't just for him, but for everyone who believed in the possibility of a better world. He was a symbol of that hope. He didn't protest any further. He just gave me a small, tired smile and nodded. I took his compliance as agreement. I also had a big surprise planned for him. My blog had become so popular that a small independent media company had approached me about turning it into a podcast. My idea was to co-host it with Aiden. It would be called The Empathic Man. He would be the living proof of the theories I'd been writing about for years. I thought it was a brilliant way for him to share his unique perspective with the world, and it would be a project we could work on together, keeping us close as he transitioned into adulthood. I decided to announce it at his birthday party. It would be the perfect finale to the celebration. I spent weeks planning every detail: the organic, locally sourced menu, the playlist of empowering female artists, the biodegradable decorations. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to reflect the values I had instilled in my son. The week before the party, Adan was very quiet. I attributed it to senior year stress and the anxiety of a major life transition. I tried to talk to him about it, to offer him a safe space to share his feelings. He just said he was fine, just thinking about finals. I even found him packing an old duffel bag in his room one evening. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was just sorting through some old clothes to donate. It was such a thoughtful, generous thing to do. I remember feeling a swell of pride. Even under stress, he was thinking of others. He was everything I had ever hoped he would be. I had no idea I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I had no idea that the perfect world I had so carefully constructed was about to be shattered into a million pieces. I just saw my son, my perfect son, and I was so proud. The day of the party was bright and clear. The house was spotless, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and gourmet coffee. My friends started arriving around noon. They were all so impressed with how everything looked. Adan came downstairs right on time, dressed in the linen shirt and tailored trousers I'd picked out for him. He looked so handsome, so refined, not like the other boys his age in their baggy jeans and loud graphic t-shirts. He was gracious and composed, greeting my friends with a polite smile. He moved through the crowd effortlessly, offering people drinks, engaging in quiet conversation. I watched him from across the room, my heart swelling with pride. This was him. This was the man I had raised. My friend Eleanor came up to me, a glass of champagne in her hand. She told me Aiden was a marvel, a credit to me. She said she wished her own son was half as thoughtful. I just smiled. It felt good to be seen, to have my hard work acknowledged. After we had eaten, I tapped a glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. It was time for the speeches. I gave a short one first. I talked about the journey of motherhood, about the challenges and the rewards. I spoke about my hope for a future where men could be gentle and empathetic without shame. I finished by saying how proud I was of the young man Adan had become. My voice cracked with genuine emotion. Everyone clapped. Some of my friends were tearing up. Then it was Adan's turn. I handed him the single sheet of paper with the speech we had prepared together. He took it, his hand steady. He walked to the center of the living room. He read it beautifully. His voice was clear and even. He thanked me for my guidance and for teaching him to question the world around him. He spoke about the importance of listening and the strength found in vulnerability. Every word was perfect. It was everything I believed, articulated through the voice of the person who mattered most. When he finished, the applause was even louder. He just gave a small, reserved nod and went back to his seat. I let the applause die down, and then I raised my hand again. I had one more announcement. I told everyone about the podcast. The Empathic Man. I explained the concept, how Adan and I would co-host it, sharing our journey and insights with a wider audience. I presented it as his next great step, a platform to use his unique voice for positive change. A murmur of excitement went through the room. People were thrilled. I looked over at Adan to see his reaction. He was just sitting there, watching me. His face was completely blank. I interpreted it as shock, maybe a little bit of awe that I had arranged this incredible opportunity for him. The party continued for another hour or so. Adan remained a perfect host, though he seemed to be fading a little. I figured he was just exhausted. It had been a big, emotional day. By the time the last guest left, the sun was setting. I gave him a huge hug and told him again how proud I was. He hugged me back, but it felt distant, like he was just going through the motions. He said he was tired and was going to head to bed early. I told him that was a good idea. We could talk all about the podcast in the morning. He just said, "Okay," and went upstairs. I stayed downstairs for a while, cleaning up, basking in the glow of a perfect day. I felt like I was floating. My son was 18. He was an adult, and he was a masterpiece. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and energized. I made coffee and sat down at the kitchen table, sketching out ideas for our first podcast episode. After about an hour, I realized I hadn't heard any noise from upstairs. I figured Odin was sleeping in, which he deserved after yesterday. But by 10 a.m., I started to feel a little impatient. I wanted to start planning with him. I went upstairs and knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder. "Adan, you awake?" Still nothing. I turned the knob. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The second thing I noticed was the neatness. The room was immaculate. His bed was made with military precision. The pillows were fluffed. That was wrong. Adan never made his bed. I always had to remind him. My eyes scanned the room. On his desk, his laptop was closed, sitting perfectly in the center. Next to it was his smartphone. Screen dark. A neat stack of books was piled beside them. All the books on social theory and feminist literature I'd given him over the years. My stomach started to twist. This felt staged, wrong. Then I saw it. On the perfectly smooth surface of his pillow, a single folded piece of white paper. I walked over to the bed, my legs feeling strangely heavy. My hand was trembling as I reached for it. I unfolded the paper. There were only 3 sentences, written in his neat, careful handwriting. "I'm 18. I'm gone. Don't look for me." I read it again and again. The words wouldn't make sense. This had to be a joke, a very, very cruel joke. He was probably hiding in the closet, waiting to jump out and surprise me. I checked the closet. It was half empty. His duffel bag was gone. So were his jeans, his plain t-shirts, his sturdy-looking boots. All the gender-neutral, earth-toned clothing I'd bought him was still hanging there, perfectly spaced on their hangers. Panic began to bubble up in my chest. I grabbed the smartphone from his desk and tried to turn it on. The battery was dead. Of course, he'd left it. He'd left it on purpose. I ran back downstairs to my own phone and tried calling him. It went straight to his phone, which was still upstairs in my other hand. I checked our joint bank account, the one I'd set up for his allowance and savings. The balance was 0. He had withdrawn all the money yesterday afternoon, right before the party. He had been planning this. While he was smiling and reading my speech, he was planning this. The panic turned into a cold, terrifying dread. My first call was to Colt. He answered on the second ring. I was hysterical. I was crying and shouting into the phone, asking if he knew where Aden was, if he had said anything. His voice was so calm, it was infuriating. He just said, "Heaven, slow down. What are you talking about?" I told him about the empty room, the note. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then he said he hadn't seen Aden and didn't know anything about it. He said maybe Aden just needed some space to clear his head after the big party. Space? He emptied his bank account and left a note like a fugitive. This wasn't needing space. I hung up on him. He was useless, worse than useless. My next call was to the police. I explained the situation to the dispatcher. I was trying to stay calm, to sound like a rational, concerned mother. The woman on the other end of the line was completely dismissive. She asked me how old my son was. I said he had just turned 18. Her tone changed immediately. She told me that, since he was a legal adult, he wasn't considered a missing person. She said he had the right to leave if he wanted to, and there was nothing they could do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I started to argue, to tell her she didn't understand, that he could be in danger. She cut me off and told me they couldn't file a report unless there was evidence of foul play. An adult leaving home is not a crime, she said. I was shaking with rage and fear. The system, the patriarchal system, was failing me, failing my son. I didn't know what else to do, so I turned to the only place I knew I would find support. I went online. I wrote a long, frantic post on my blog. I poured out everything: the perfect party, the strange quietness in my son, the empty room, the chillingly brief note. I didn't frame it as him leaving. I framed it as something that had been done to him. I wrote that I was terrified he had been manipulated, that some malicious influence had poisoned his mind against me. I suggested that his father and uncle, with their regressive ideas, might have been involved in this. I ended the post with a desperate plea for help, for any information, for support. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments flooded in within the first hour. My followers were amazing. They were horrified on my behalf. They offered theories. They sent messages of love and solidarity. They confirmed all my worst fears, agreeing that he must have been coerced. No son would do that to a mother like me. For a few hours, their support was a lifeline. I felt less alone. We were a community, united against this terrible injustice. I stayed online all day and into the night, reading every comment, feeling a small sense of hope. The truth would come out. Aden would be found. Then, the next afternoon, everything changed. A new comment appeared on my post. It was from a name I hadn't seen in years: Colt. It was short and to the point. It said, "Aden is safe. He is with people who love him. He is an adult, and he has made his own decision. Please respect his privacy." My heart stopped. He knew. He had been lying to me the entire time. Before I could even process what to write back, another notification popped up. Someone had tagged me in a photo on a different platform. The profile belonged to Killian. I had never looked at his page before. It was public. The photo was new. It had been posted just minutes ago. It was taken in a cluttered, greasy-looking auto garage. In the photo stood Killian, grinning from ear to ear, and next to him, with one arm slung over his uncle's shoulder, was Aden. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt stained with oil and a pair of worn-out jeans. His hair was a mess. His hands were dirty. And he was smiling. It wasn't the polite, reserved smile from the party. It was a huge, genuine, unguarded grin. He looked happier than I had ever seen him in his entire life. The caption under the photo was simple: "Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life, kid. Proud of you." It was like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My son wasn't kidnapped. He wasn't manipulated. He had chosen this. He had chosen them. He had chosen a world of grease and noise and everything I had fought so hard to protect him from. And then the comments on my own blog post started to turn. People had seen the photo. They started connecting the dots. The messages of support slowed down, replaced by questions. "Did you ever ask him what he wanted? The boy in that picture looks happy. Maybe you should be happy for him. This whole blog is about him. It feels like you used him as an experiment. He didn't run from masculinity. He ran from you." The accusations grew harsher. I was a narcissist, a controlling monomaniac. I had treated my son like a prop, My community, my support system, was turning on me with vicious speed. They were using my own language of therapy and psychology against me, dissecting my every motive. I tried to delete the comments, to block the users, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a paper cup. My inbox filled with hateful messages. My life's work, my reputation as a thoughtful, progressive parent, was being dismantled in real time for everyone to see. I finally just shut my laptop. I walked back upstairs, past the living room that still held the ghosts of the perfect party. I went into Aidan's room, his empty, silent room. I sat on the edge of his perfectly made bed, the place where I had found the note. It was all gone. My son, my career, my community. I had done everything right. I had followed all the rules. I had dedicated my entire existence to creating something good and pure. And in one single day, it had all been for nothing. I still don't understand how. I still don't understand what I did wrong. I just wanted to raise a perfect son,